Today, we're going to be talking a little bit of cyber risk, something I am woefully unprepared and inadequate at speaking about. But we got our buddy here, Bill. Bill, tell us, how did you get into this whole world of cybersecurity and all these crazy things going on out there?
Sure. Hey, Josh, nice to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me
absolutely.
on the show. Yeah, so I've had a long career in tech, primarily in the software business, in networks, network devices, sensitive data. Um, I kind of funny. I'll try not to um, blabber on, but I grew up in the Bay Area in the early '80s. In high school, kind of when a lot of tech was, I suppose, a little more accessible there than some places.
Sure.
And not to say that I was, a geek sitting at home with my computer all the time. I played sports and was reasonably popular, but we also, did dial up electronic bulletin boards, and my relatives worked for tech companies. And, by the time I went to college, I was the only kid who had a PC in my dorm, and had to teach all my buddies WordStar and running my dot matrix computer and, printer and crazy.
Oh yeah.
Um, I got into telecommunications out of college
Mm.
and worked in that specific area for 3 or 4 years until I got really into the software business. And, because I had some familiarity with software and, could run a Unix box, and um, I started presenting technology, software in the telecommunications space to new mobile works networks around the world.
Mm.
And that kind of got me into a whole lot of different specialized software areas like network management, network inventory, service quality systems, network connectivity. And I went to work with what used to be called Bellcore. Now it became Telcordia. Now it's part of Ericsson. But got exposed to a lot of really interesting projects with increasingly sensitive data, as telco went digital. Um, Started helping, telcos do provisioning of digital services, all through moving to the cloud, starting to achieve massive scale, working with data platforms. And a little bit afterwards, I took a little turn and went into data platforms, medical data platforms, API platforms. Did a little work with medical devices and some of that sensitive data. And about that time, someone from the insurance industry approached me and said, you got an interesting background, and the fastest growing type of coverage is what we call cyber,
Mm.
and nobody knows how to sell it. And uh, you have an interesting way of talking about these things, and ended up starting my first entrepreneurial venture with someone, working with a handful, mostly California companies who were selling cyber products to their clients. And what we really decided was the best approach was to use standards and frameworks like, NIST 853, to kind of profile risk, identify, what their key areas of risk were, look at whether they needed to make remediations in order to maximize their ability to be insured, at the best rates, and according to what the underwriters are looking at. So we kind of tailored a unique risk assessment towards those folks, and that created really a path that I've gone down, for the last 8 or so years, which
Mm.
is helping risk advisors to be able to assess risk, remediate risk, and even insure risk when necessary.
So
So
you
TEKRISQ, my company now, that's really what we're focused on.
And that would have been about 10 years ago that you started getting into that insurance kind of conversation.
Maybe a little less, about 8 years ago.
Okay, about 8 years ago. Okay. All right, that's interesting. So now I have like very little knowledge here. The clients do, the folks watching this is all very familiar to them as they evolve and continue to learn. But like if I just said, "Oh, he's an insurance guy. He owns an insurance agency." Like, if I just said that's who you are, how wrong would I be?
Well, I'd say that's the newest thing I do.
Okay.
We became brokers only a few years back.
Okay.
And really, the only reason we became brokers is after working with a lot of brokers and seeing the way they went about protecting their clients.
Mhm.
We just said, wow, they're missing the mark.
They're missing the mark.
And we should pick up that part of the business ourselves.
Yeah.
And not to say there aren't some great brokers out there, but I would say, um, the insurance business in general is about broadly insuring your clients against all of their risks.
Mhm.
And they do a pretty good job in all of them, but most of them aren't comfortable with tech.
Yeah.
And less than 10% of their book of business carries any type of technology insurance, cyber liability, even crime. And it's a conversation they don't like having. It's kind of a pain in the ass to them. And we're real comfortable with that. Don't ask me anything about how you cover anybody for homeowners or flood, but if you want
Sure.
to talk about, exactly how to protect them properly against a breach and balance that against the solutions they use,
Mhm.
um, we could talk all day about that.
All right. So let me I'm just gonna, you're now my expert, so I get to ask all the crazy dumb questions I want now. So uh like we at Barry McKinley, we got a cyber liability policy last year, after a bunch of years. And, I could tell you all about our environment and all that. But uh so I was doing some stuff on the personal side, and I called my State Farm guy here in Chicago. And he's, nice guy, 75 years old. His right-hand person is his wife, who's probably similarly aged. And, they tried to play along. And I was like, well, I'll play along. And then they send me some ridiculous form. And I'm like, I don't know anything, but this doesn't mean anything. Like, you've clearly got some firm that you use in this case, and you don't know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. So I called a company called TechRug. Are you familiar with TechRug?
Tech rug? No.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot, if I had to say most, I probably wouldn't be too wrong. Most MSPs buy their cyber liability insurance through TechRug. They've been around
Okay.
a long time. And I went through that process. And, we're not an MSP, we're a consulting firm serving MSPs. TechRug does really good with the MSPs. They kind of had to struggle to figure out how our environment was different than an MSP's environment. And everyone did a good job, and we bought our policy and whatnot. But the thing that got me curious is, and we've got some other folks in cybersecurity that kind of give us, information, and they're like, look, anyone's gonna sell you a fucking policy. That you'll dance through all the hoops. They won't tell you that they think what you wrote was bullshit. They'll just kind of raise your premium a little bit. It's when you go to make that claim that you're fucked. Like, they already know where you're screwed. And I think that's a pretty pessimistic view of the world, or skeptical view of the world, but they don't say it for nothing. Have yet had the unfortunate opportunity to shepherd a client through making a claim?
Sure.
Yeah.
Both as an insured and as someone who uh, decided to forego insurance and then after the fact was hoping to get insured. We get a lot of that too.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, you're not at all wrong. Most agents, and I don't know the guys that you're talking about, so I'm
Mhm.
speaking from my experience, but
Sure.
most agents believe that you should carry a little bit of cyber
Mhm. Right, right.
without matching the size of the risk to the size of the coverage, without
Mhm.
matching the industry risk to the coverage, without matching the maturity or the specific vulnerabilities identified through some process to what you're selling.
Mhm.
And that's like if I said to you, Josh, you should have some fire on your home. Let's get you $100,000 of fire. Well,
Mhm.
maybe you got a $2 million house.
Mhm.
And if you've got a $20,000 deductible and 100 grand policy, what's the point?
What's the point? Right.
So
Right.
what you really have to do is start by assessing risk. What is
Mhm.
this company's unique risk? And everyone's is unique.
Mhm.
And most people don't stop to take the time to say, what do we need to find out about this company to properly protect them?
Right.
And so that discussion, those topics, and the methodology that we use to arrive at that um, is not unlike, I'm sure, the way some people calculate flood.
Sure.
But I live in South Carolina. We've got a lot of tidal activity and a lot of people living on the marsh.
Right.
Um, and when I buy uh, flood insurance, they come out, they look for the newest maps, they
Mhm.
identify what's happening with tidal activity, they remeasure how far away I am from the marsh. They look
Mhm.
at what's been reported in the streets. They have a methodology to determine what's the right kind of coverage to protect me.
Mhm.
When they present that to me, it makes sense to me.
Right.
Um, and that's what we try and do.
I see. So when you that I love those kind of very relevant analogies. So I think that my brain starts to break there because I've got, okay, if I'm the small business and I talk to you, you're going to say, here's your risk profile. And these are the things you're risked at. Now, if you didn't have your broker's license, I'd be like, all right, thanks, dude. Appreciate it. My insurance company still doesn't get it. How did you help that transaction before you started being able to sell insurance in the first place?
Yeah. Um, well, we usually have relationships with brokers where we share our reports with them,
Mhm.
but we also have a conversation and
Mm.
say, this is what looks appropriate for this client. Um, and, the clients don't always follow their requests because, look, cyber insurance, even though it's been around a while,
Mhm.
it's still poorly understood.
Mhm.
It's still not used, I would say, by most businesses.
Right.
As I just saw a report that came out this week that said 50% of small, medium-sized businesses don't know what cyber insurance is.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right.
But what's interesting is if you look at all the major breaches in the last decade, they all have originated with some small business in the supply chain that was used to gain access to the bigger ecosystem of companies.
Right.
And that's why
Right.
you see the broad proliferation of supply chain risk and third party risk management
Mm.
being adopted and even required by some regulators. And here's kind of the tough news. If you're a small business and you're ignoring this, and maybe you go out and you're trying to close a deal with a marquee customer who wants to do business with you, at some point they're going to ask you to expose your risk profile or any of the things you've done to protect yourself as a candidate to fit into their whole ecosystem.
Right.
And if you got nothing but bad answers, you might lose that deal.
Uh,
So
Yeah.
that's where this is also a business risk.
Yes.
You don't want the CFO and the CEO of the company saying, "All right, do the cyber thing so we can close the deal." And you're like,
Mhm.
"What they want us to do is monumental. We never even talked about this stuff." Well,
Right.
you got to get ahead of it and be ready for it. That's a risk in itself.
And I don't want to, it'd be very easy for me to just hear and kind of shit on small businesses for how they approach, security. But I'll try to avoid that. I talk to, a dozen MSPs every week about all sorts of topics. So at least 5, 6 times a month, an MSP wants to tell me their story about, we got this client and they won't do any of the cybersecurity, standards that we're asking them to do. We're not asking them to go all in. We just want them to have multi-factor authentication or just very basic fundamental things. And it's,
Back up their data.
yeah, right. Yeah. In fact, we just heard a story. My brother-in-law is a really awesome MSP, and he was telling my wife that, "Oh, yeah, we just had somebody get breached, I think $250,000 was stolen from them." And he said, "And it sucks, I hate that for them, but it wasn't 3 weeks ago we presented them, 'You guys gotta start doing the multi-factor authentication,' and they were just like, 'Nah, it's too much of a pain in the ass, our employers will freak out,'" and it's like, only because I'm so entrenched in this world that sounds really stupid. But if I'm just a Joe off the street and I'm like, What are you talking about? No one wants my shit," or, "Yeah, it is a pain in the ass to do the multi-factor." They're not, I mean, I get it. Like, I totally get it. But would you say we're to a place now where and I hate this statement, but it's like, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Do we think we're
Oh,
there yet?
we've been there. It's
Yeah.
more than a matter of when, it's are they there now?
Right.
You know,
Right.
they're not in it. There are so many ways for companies to get stolen credentials
Yeah.
and penetrate your systems, but they're not necessarily in it for the quick wins.
No.
They are camped out. They're understanding, and they have tools to do this, to understand how you transact, how frequently,
Right.
how exposed the transactions are that you make,
Yeah.
and looking for the right timing to pounce.
That
And they
that was
love complacent companies.
that was this one, Bill. It was they just sat there and watched. They just sat there, and when it was time, they took $250,000, did a bank transfer, and it was done. It was over. Like, I've heard of
Well,
that
it's
kind of
great
just
that they caught
time.
it because
Yeah.
bigger companies might be losing that on a regular basis. And it's just a test. Like, are
Yeah.
they noticing this much?
Right.
Are they noticing that? Because anybody who's been breached and isn't remediating any of their records, aren't remediating any of their controls to prevent that from happening again.
Right.
I mean, that's the ultimate suckers list. And
You turn it into an ATM for those hackers.
absolutely, they're watching. These guys are great. They're walking around blind and they're comfortable with complacency. And let's keep our eye on them. We'll be back for more.
Man, you hear stats just kind of floating around. Maybe you've got some stats yourself around, like there was one that was real popular for a while of, X% of companies that had a breach of some type were out of business some short number of months later. Have you heard
Yeah, I
those
know
kind
the
of stats?
ones. 60% are out of business within 12 months. That's
Yeah.
debated a little bit.
Okay.
I'll tell you something that's real
Yeah.
and that I think businesses should be very aware of because no one's out bragging about how they got breached. Everyone, when it happens, feels terrible and wants to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
And I understand that mentality, but here's what you need to know. Uh, Last year, the US did something like, I don't know, $33 trillion in business. That's the size of our GDP. China, I think, did somewhere around 13. And if the hackers all got together, they'd be number three. They did about $10 trillion of crime last year.
Wow.
But they're growing faster than the United States, faster than China. They're ahead of Germany and all the EU countries. They're killing it.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
easier and easier. And the fact that people are not even mounting a defense is
Mhm.
total capitulation. And if
Mm.
you are a business owner and you care about your business, number one, you got to wake up and realize you may not have thought about it at all, but you're at a war, you're in a war. And if you don't mount a defense, you're going to lose.
Damn. Okay, so then with
So enough scaring everybody.
no, it's real. I get it. Yeah, I appreciate those stats. That's so helpful. So when when our MSPs are going out there and they're saying, well, let me analogize it this way. So, do you fly planes, by the way, by chance?
Yeah.
You do?
You mean, am I a pilot?
Yeah,
No, I'm not
yeah.
a pilot.
Okay. All right. So I'm a very low hour pilot. Like, just like I might as well not be a
Cool.
pilot. But
Cool.
I learn enough to say, like, I like to fly this plane called a Cirrus SR-22 Turbo. It has a parachute. It's like a $2 or $3 million plane. It's beautiful. It's highly complex. I've got a couple hundred hours in it. And when I first started my flying journey, I was like, oh, sweet. I got my instrument ready. I get this. I'm going to go fly the plane. Like,
Mhm.
thinking the next day I'd go fly the plane. FAA says I can. I'm qualified. I have all the things. Then I learned the FAA don't mean shit. The insurance company decides who flies that plane. All right. So they own it's their hole. They make the real rules. I wonder, and I think we don't necessarily want that kind of control in the technology space, but if I've got an MSP who's, talking to the $2 million accounting firm who just doesn't give a shit, uh, when does some leverage come in to say, you have to have this in order to do business? I mean,
Well,
you
yeah,
understand the question?
I do.
We
And,
don't want
there's
that,
some,
but when does it happen?
well, there's some interesting challenges that the insurance business is going through. Um, and there's a lot of sharp underwriters
Mhm,
who have really analyzed claims data and they know where they lose money. And they are always trying their best to keep up with the right cybersecurity protections
mhm,
and reward the people who have them in place and who demonstrate a culture of cybersecurity, which is great. That's the right thing to do. However, there's a whole lot of insuretech companies, young, innovative companies who have kind of discovered, wow, insurance is going through a transformation today, and we can use technology to underwrite faster and better and, eat more and more of the big traditional carriers' pie. And they've discovered that these insurance agents don't want to hassle with these complex apps that ask, are you enforcing multi-factor authentication administratively across all the different apps and can you provide evidence of it? Are you using endpoint detection and response on every endpoint in your network? Blah, blah, blah.
mhm.
Uh, they are interested in streamlining the questions in the app and driving them downward to 3 or 4 simple questions.
Mm,
And they use, vulnerability scanning tools and risk ratings tools to assemble somewhat of a profile that lets them know, is this a go or no go client? And
right.
then we'll force them to put all this stuff in after we close the deal.
Mm,
And that's hurting insurance a little bit, in
mm,
my opinion.
right.
What you really want to do is establish a rewards for remediations approach,
Mm,
and if you're not doing that, you're moving farther away from the problem. Um, we talk with a lot of agents and, we see a ton of them gravitating towards this fast, easy app and getting someone a little bit of cyber instead of, the longer, more deliberate route, which is what's best to protect this client and what's best also to protect the carriers so we have a sustainable industry.
right. Right.
And that balance, in my opinion, is a little bit off. I think the underwriters should be, this is the data driven age, right? They should be
Right.
using all the data at their disposal to make good underwriting decisions about, is this company putting on a song and dance about how, secure they are, or what type of evidence can we point to that's discoverable through either risk assessment or, externally observable tools to measure that? And
Mm,
how can we get them to commit to showing us that on a regular basis? How can we give them perks to help them grow their, defenses? And this is an area that I think MSPs can be hugely helpful with if they pay attention to, the way they go about managing their relationships. I,
you know,
I think a lot of companies, don't want some tech guy calling them and badgering them about, gobbledygook they don't understand. I think you know, we're big believers in the new factory approach. Give someone something free and of value and see if you can help them as a result, and that will turn into business for you.
yeah.
And I think if they were working more towards how do we help people discover their risks and how do we help them remediate their specific risks and talk
Mm,
plain language with them, business language,
right.
then we will really get somewhere with this.
Yeah, and it is, you use the word, earlier, scared and fear and whatnot. And I think that's been the primary tool in the tool belt of the MSP is, let me share really terrible stories to help this person get it that they are at risk. And that doesn't seem to be moving the needle. So you're using this, I've heard you say this new factory model a couple times. I'm not familiar with that phrase. What does that mean, by the way? New factory.
It's just a different way of thinking about how you do business with people. It's,
Okay.
rather than this transactional thing, if you give me this, I'll do this for you. And it's
Right.
instead, here, let me give you this and see if it helps you. And when it
Yes.
does, do business with me.
I got you. Okay. All
And
right.
I think that's there's so many companies who are following that approach that it gets harder and harder to compete if, you know, engaging with someone has a high price tag, a high cost of entry. You got to find ways to engage people and help them and, give them a little bit of value before you expect them to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, so let's think about a couple things. So, number one, we see the MSP struggle. We see them, kind of, I think it's really in the last 5 or 6 years that the MSP really has learned what their role is in, okay, I've got my insurance. My insurance covers me if I make a mistake, but it doesn't cover the claim that the client is going to have to make at some point. So they need to have their own insurance policy. That wasn't a long, learning cycle. They got that pretty quickly. Then we got into this kind of incident response where it's like, oh, an incident happened. As the MSP, I'm used to running in and trying to save, where they now obviously know I don't once I hear the word breach, I can't touch it. That's a crime scene now. The insurance company has to come and execute on that. So, and tell me about those two scenarios and what you've seen evolve over the last, 5, 7, 8 years.
Well, it's very important for everybody to learn the vernacular and establish a different appreciation of what is an event, what is an incident, and what is a breach.
Thank you, because I
Uh,
do not. Those are all synonyms to me, so help me out.
um, yeah, just because somebody has, just because you've received a notification of something, isn't necessarily. Um, it's certainly no evidence of a breach, and it may not be a cybersecurity incident. Um, and there's a million different ways that you can classify those things, but at a minimum, everyone should be paying attention in one way or another to events, incidences, and breaches. Should be very careful about rushing to judgment about what something is, and should be focused on preventing the breaches by understanding what types of events are likely to come their way and what might escalate to an incident. And that's different company to company, industry to industry. And so they're all reasons to really have an independent view of what the risks your company faces looks like. So lawyers will tell you don't use a breach unless I tell you to. But just like you said, a breach will target a separate set of actions. Suddenly that gets handed over to an incident response team with the insurer or the folks who are downstream of that breach who require by contract that they have to be notified might move in and take that over. And then you have, these big law firms like Woodruff Sawyer who jump in and, have all these resources that they immediately begin to architect the response, which is great. That's what you want them to do. But yeah, the biggest of those is a breach, and a breach means that there's a bad actor who is active in your systems, doing damage, has malicious intent, and that's clearly identified. And you're trying to understand the pain, stop the pain, and evaluate how resilient are we to this. Um, I'll just give you a very simple example, and apologies to folks who might be listening who know this area well, but this is deliberately crude. Um, if you are not backing up your data and you get hit with the red screen of death, the ransomware notification, please pay us in Bitcoin or we're going to destroy all your shit and you're fucked. Um, that's a really bad situation, and you might be advised pay whatever they ask. The bad news is, if you pay it fast, they might ask for more. There's no guarantee that these are people of honor who are going to Follow whatever you guys agree to the first time. And this can be extraordinarily expensive, but many people find themselves stuck. If you are doing those things and are backing up and testing your restoration activities, you might determine this isn't the thing. Fuck these guys, and be able to rebound through, some pretty simple steps. And there's a million shades of gray in between. So the most dangerous way to navigate any of these risks is to blow them off and ignore them and not mount a defense. You got to be preparing. And the good news is you don't really have to do a lot to send the bad guys the other way. They're increasingly targeting small and medium-sized businesses because they're easy and they can do it in automated fashion. But if they demonstrate any complexity whatsoever, what's that saying they have about if you get chased by a lion in Africa, you don't need to outrun the lion, you just need to outrun the next dude. They're going to go to the next company because they're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of them a day. So you just want to be, strong enough and resilient enough that they'll lose interest. The prize isn't worth the effort. So, to simplify the response and give you, the best way to say it, everybody needs a buddy in this area. Whether it's your MSP, whether it's the folks who are minding your insurance, whether it's a consulting relationship you have, um, you need somebody to turn to when these issues start to interfere with your operations. And yeah, depending upon what's happening, the judgment of people in the know to determine what the right course of action becomes extremely important. I can't tell you how many times since I've been in this business, um, we've assessed companies, made recommendations, and the executives have said, okay, well, I don't personally think that that's a big deal. I'll maybe do this and that, but not those things, and appreciate it. And this is good information to have, but we're not doing much of this. And then we'll get a call. It could be a month later, could be 2 years later. No, but you guys got to help me. You got to help me. Uh, and they're panicked, very emotional. They want advice. There's not always much that can be done when they've overlooked these things. Um, but we always offer to do what we can and help provide them with guidance. And they end up being a hell of a lot more concerned about protecting themselves after these incidences. They're not all breaches. Sometimes they have happy endings. And but you got to act quick. You got to be ready. And I would say anyone who's listening who isn't protecting their business, get a buddy. Yeah, we actually have a number of stories. I'll give you a good one. One of our customers who is doing all the right stuff and protecting their business and using the right controls was in a conference in Vegas and took their personal device. I think it was a tablet, and wandered in the middle of the night after a night out at the tables. to get a cup of coffee and do some work, took their device, cruised into a coffee shop, uh, doing a few personal things on it, and lost 400 grand in their, was it Coinbase, the company, and called us in a panic and said, guys, what do I do? And we helped him as best as we could. It did have a happy ending. We were able to alert the companies, and the bank was able to make some quick reversals. And since the bank ended up not following the right process, it was on them. Um, I'll just word of caution: banks are getting wise to this and being a lot more careful every day. But in this situation, he was able to recoup some of it. I think it was about a $400,000 attempt, and they got 100 grand or so of his, and he got reimbursed for the rest. We talked a little earlier about how they'll sit and watch. Um, you know, some companies have, we have a client who's in the real estate development business, and at any given time, in any given month, they may have $8 to $10 million running through their account. And one day that account may have 200 grand in it, and the next day may have 7.5 million in it. And people will watch. They will target those industries, and they will get in and keep very quiet and watch and wait and pounce when they know, okay, we're at like a close to an all-time high today. Let's get it. Thanks. Sounds cool. It's a it's a big question, Josh. No guarantees, but I'll tell you this. Here's what I believe. I'll answer this the same way I answer when people talk about the threat that AI poses and, who should be involved and all that. Your son sounds extraordinarily creative, and he sounds like a student of human behavior. And cybersecurity certainly takes a lot of learning and memorization and knowledge, but its application and the different ways to protect people is entirely creative. And the proof is all the creative ways that those sons of bitches are breaching different companies and camping out and watching. You've got to outsmart those guys. And the more people with human intuition and creativity to imagine different scenarios, like, have you ever seen what's that movie with Matt Damon and George Clooney where they go into the casino and heist every? Ocean Those dudes were creative. Those are the best thieves, and the people who stop them can equal or outsmart them. You might just do great. He's the Bryson DeChambeau of cybersecurity. You mean hard, fast rules? I think every situation is totally unique, and I can't imagine going into every situation with the playbook. I think it's more dynamic than that, and it's about critical thinking and creativity and fast problem solving and intuition and curiosity and clever approaches, different approaches to things. And this is where I believe, um, yeah, and I definitely do not want to go anywhere political with this, but I think the diversity of a team that brings different perspectives together to try different shit is extraordinarily valuable. And the more homogenous a team is, the less flexible they will be. Yeah. I'll just say these folks could be in Belarus or they could be in Winnetka, Illinois. Sure. So we believe that cybersecurity today, the way it's proposed to small and medium sized businesses who aren't yet doing the things they need to do, is too expensive and too complicated and a pain in the ass and something people dread and boring, and they just think it's a distraction and they want to focus on their core businesses. It's a big company's game. They don't know that they're the new targets. They have never really thought about all the creative different ways that they can get screwed. They aren't aware of all the different ways that folks are getting screwed, and everyone talking to them about this problem is speaking past them. I get calls from MSPs all the time, and I just cringe listening to the sales guys, you know, throwing messages at me that are half baked, trying to scare me, and not having any relevance to the business I'm in. And it's a little baffling. Yeah, oh yeah, constantly, constantly. I mean, I only engage in the calls because I'm interested in hearing how they're doing this. and learning from it because it's helpful for me to sharpen our messaging. We think talking past people is not how you do business. You have to connect with people. We think making simple things actionable and providing as much of a solution to something as possible in pragmatic ways is how you win this. And we think doing it in a turnkey way is important. So that's why we assess, remediate, and insure risk. We believe that the small, medium-sized businesses essentially need to understand what they're looking at. In business language, you need to create executive summaries in business English that connect with CEOs and business owners. And you got to provide them with a list of options that are digestible. If you give them what a lot of people do, which is a copy of War and Peace written in Sanskrit that suggests they move mountains, it ends up in the bin and it's totally unactionable. They need a leaflet with a starting point where they don't have to hire anyone and they barely have to open their wallets and they get on that path. And so we're focused on that. And we're also focused in taking a lot of the irrelevant complexity out of cybersecurity and making it faster, easier, and affordable. The biggest place we're doing that is in cyber risk assessment. We want, we've found over the years that a lot of people don't want to talk to other humans about this. And they certainly don't want to populate insurance applications or spreadsheets. So we've created really scalable risk assessment tools. We use AI avatars that conduct conversations and in the most effective way with simple language and give people options they can point and click on and they can get through it in a half hour. And we're finding some interesting things about that too, which may not surprise you. It kind of surprised us at the beginning, but well, like remember when texting became a thing and suddenly everyone stopped calling each other? Well, once you can have this conversation with a really efficient avatar, uh, people are responding to it quicker. They're all doing it after hours. Like 90% of our assessments get completed after 6 p.m. And when we compare them with clients that have done it with humans the previous year, they're a lot more forthcoming. I think that there's a negative connotation to the confrontational discussion that a cybersecurity expert has with someone who knows they're not doing all the right stuff and it's embarrassing and they got to fess up. But they don't have any problem talking to an avatar about that. And so we're trying to make that a scalable thing. We have a platform that can shepherd people through this in half an hour and it can scale to do thousands of these in parallel. And that's our mission is to bring really scalable, simple solutions. And by the way, cybersecurity people can be really expensive. This lowers costs and makes those first steps affordable to any size business. And so that's what we're focused on. Yep. We can do that, but increasingly we're brought in by partners like MSSPs who, just want us to do, that front end assessment. What do you recommend that is needed here? And what are the other things they should be doing in terms of compliance or readiness and business risk? And so we'll make those recommendations. And that's a great actionable, an independent risk assessment is a great way in our minds for an MSP to say, hey, here's a complimentary thing you can do. And why don't you see what it tells you? And if you have any of those, let's discuss it. It's a good business development tool. It's better than badgering them with fear. There isn't any market that we are excluding ourselves from. We're just increasingly working behind trusted advisors to provide them with a tool to affordably engage companies and possibly generate opportunities for them to help. Well, I'll give you a real small business example. We find that a lot of MSPs are out selling a gold, silver, bronze package type of approach. And every single business is different. So that, which bucket do we put you in thing can be a little nauseating for business owners. Um, but uh, there's a solopreneur that we assessed recently, and this business owner is in the marketing business, and they had a couple of unique risks, but um, they have some contracted employees, but really only one full-time employee, have a lot of records that they manage, and didn't need to build a Google data center. For that particular customer, we said, look, you should be using a VPN everywhere that you're accessing things. You should back up all the data. You have some compliance risks because of the number of records you handle. So you ought to put a couple of these small solutions in. And we recommend you get a big insurance policy because the remediation costs of a breach, are going to be X amount per record. And if you do the math with the records that you're managing, that could be millions. And I'm guessing you don't have an extra, 5 to 7 million laying around. And it's, no, what do I need to do to get my little business that kind of insurance? And the good news is for a solopreneur, it's cheap. So we put a complete solution together that consisted of the right pragmatic remediations. I think she spends less than $20 a month on the things that we've installed there. Has a $2,000 a year insurance policy, and has ticked some compliance boxes, and uses that as a differentiator in her business. She's had more than two occasions where she's mentioned to a client who's looking at her against some other competitors and said, have they shown you how they're protecting your data? And that's a very clever way that businesses have to start thinking about differentiating on preparedness. It's way too big of a compliment, Josh. TEKRISQ.com. We spell it funny, TEKRISQ. And look, we're easy to reach. We can be that buddy for small and medium sized businesses. If you need someone to reach out to and have a discussion about this and face your issues pragmatically and uniquely identify what your business risks look like, or if you're an MSP who thinks, hey, this might be a good approach for us, let's have a chat. You can find all of our contact details there, or you can email me at BH, like Bill Haber, at TEKRISQ, TEKRISQ.com. Thanks. See ya.